there was a change as of 4 days ago about record keeping for psychologists, not for MFTs or LCSWs, but for psychologists in California that I'll get to shortly. But a number of you picked up on when I was talking about the Ewing versus Goldstein case that Mr. Capella did not fill in that blank and that was a major issue. It indeed is a major issue. Had he written down at the time 0 with a line through it, that may have made a difference between the hospital being willing to defend or not defend, the insurance company being willing to defend or not defend. And possibly they would have gone in the same direction, but the written record is so crucial. Now, one of the things that we hear, and I've certainly been guilty of this, of saying, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Attorneys say that a lot. It's old hospital saw. It's an old hospital rule, but it's wrong. And the reason it's wrong is there's no way we can write everything down. One friend said, I'm going to start recording all of my sessions, and I'm going to keep all of the recordings. So if there's ever a question about what I do, I've got it recorded. But we have some tension here, which is why we do a written record. Do we really want a recording of all of the client's sessions? Because if that's discovered or if that becomes available, that could be a significant intrusion into the client's privacy over and above just the fact that we know that they're in therapy. So when we reduce things to writing, we're doing so in part because it also protects the client. It means we don't keep everything. We keep a limited amount of information. And the idea is that we keep that information so that the information that's pertinent to continuity of care is available. So the continuity of care issue is important. There's a liability issue and a self-protection issue as well. For me, if I'm doing a good record keeping about continuity of care, then I'm going to be doing fine with respect to liability. It's not going to be a big issue. Yeah. But because we cannot keep perfect records, we would spend all of our time writing everything down. I mean, if you remember, those of you who did process notes for training, how long did it take you to do the process note? 1 hour session, 15-minute session, it would often take me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do a brief documentation. I felt like I wasn't really giving it its all, right? We couldn't do it. It's just not possible. So we, as the lawyers say, reduce it to writing. We memorialize what's happening. So we're always choosing what's going to go into a record. And we're always going to be dinged by attorneys if we're in a case saying, do you always keep, did you write this down? Why didn't you write this down? Why didn't you write that down? And so and so. It's very legitimate to say, I write down what I consider at the time to be the crucial information for continuity of care. But what the attorneys are trying to tell us is we need to keep, this has generally been the argument, that we need to keep more records than we've typically kept. Okay? And I think that's true for many of us, not all of us. If you do Medi-Cal work, you're sick of records. Okay? And if you're in a team setting where you're required to document every single thing, you keep plenty of records. Okay? But the main issue is continuity of care, with one exception. If there's a problem, you write more rather than less. So if I have a client like Gino, I'm going to be writing more about this man, and particularly around suicidal ideation. I'm going to be writing more about why I'm concerned about that and about potential for homicide. So the third issue is the purpose of doing, continuing education, but also the issue is one of maintaining knowledge. Now, you might very reasonably ask, how does Goldstein case really implicate keeping knowledge, maintaining good information about what we're doing? Well, in a number of ways. Knowledge is an important component. Having the information that's current is necessary for us to continue to maintain, kind of good, solid, ethical practice. A very good example right now is the debate that's been raging about evidence-based practice. Okay? And the literature, there is a very strong literature about the effectiveness of things like cognitive behavior therapy. So a wonderful summary just 2 days ago saying that actually what's most effective in behavioral therapy is just the behavioral component. Right? So it's very interesting. There's still a debate ongoing about that. Family therapy has some very strong outcome data with respect to a number of problems, including depression, anxiety, and so on. The issue is that should we always be choosing an intervention on the basis of either a manualized or, quote, proven or, empirically based treatment? Or should we be doing something else? Right? Now, my guess would be, since most of us are pretty typical providers, is we don't do manualized treatment, except for a few of us in this room. We don't have a person come in and then follow step by step. When this person says this, we say this. You know, that's typically not what we do. The argument is, on the one hand, we should be doing that kind of empirically based treatment. The other argument, coming from folks like Bruce Wumpold, say, you know, the effective components of therapy are really kind of 2- or 3-fold. They're not having to do with the particular manual. They are, very importantly, the relationship. 90% of the variance outcomes in psychotherapy have to do with the therapeutic relationship and alliance factors. 90%. And that's not just one study or 2 studies or 3 studies. It's a series of multiple meta-analyses that have suggested that that's the key factor. And then, of course, therapist-patient match of expectations and a number of other things, but those are crucial. There are even some meta-analyses that say that when you add in the specific ingredients in the manualized treatment, that the effect sizes reduce. So that it may be, and theoretically, and there's some debate about this, it may be that when we get so focused on the manual, we forget the relationship. Okay? So that it needs to be a balance between doing something that's directly effective and also making sure to maintain the relationship. Hold on one sec, okay? But because this is a debated issue right now, it's not as if you would have to say, okay, you know, I'm snapping to, salute, I'm going to use now only manualized treatments for something that's specifically diagnosed. You know? It seems to me that there's reasonable room for debate about this. And as we need to know the literature, we need to understand what the arguments are about evidence-based treatment, but we also can and need to articulate why we might disagree in a particular situation. Right? Very nice article about a month ago in the American Psychologist about doing evidence-based treatment with kids, and that the literature is pretty consistent that the evidence-based treatment is better than business as usual. But the effect sizes are not huge. They're never huge in social science work, with some exceptions. They're never that big. So there's still room for debate. It's important to be able to articulate why I might do one thing versus another, why I'm not providing, for example, you know, a straight-ahead Beck depression treatment to a man when I'm seeing a couple and they're complaining of couple issues. Seems to me that there's a legitimate reason for doing that. Okay? So we can go back and forth, but you have to know it in order to do that. So anyway, that's the reason for, you know, keeping abreast of information, trying to make sure that you're knowledgeable. It's what the purpose is of doing CEs, the MFTs and LCSWs in the room, and now, interesting enough, licensed educational psychologists have CE requirements. Just got put in place on Monday. The BBS is proposing that you can take self-study courses if you're an LCSW or an MFT up to 18 hours, but they haven't confirmed that yet. It has not gone through the regulatory process completely. They were talking about it in the fall. I was thinking it was going to happen this month or next, but just wait and see. I think you'll be notified. The self-study idea is, you know, having a book that you read and then taking a test on it. MFTs and LCSWs all along for CE have been allowed to do distance learning. That is, if I'm doing an interactional program on a computer where somebody's presenting in Los Angeles and I'm here, that's permissible. But self-study has been limited to just 12 out of the 36 credits that are required. Psychologists, as of the middle of December, are now permitted to do 27 of the 36 hours as independent study. Okay, so it used to be 18, now it's 27. We can do most of it. Right, so that's changed considerably. But you're all required to come back and take my class again. Speaking of which, the Board of Psychology has put regulations into the administrative law process. They're trying to get them approved to do away with the 4 hours every 2-year law and ethics requirement. Okay? And this is, you know, 2 or 3 years after MFTs and LCSWs have had that imposed upon them. And my guess is that the pattern will repeat itself, that we'll see MFTs and LCSWs have another 4 to 8 years of a requirement of 6 hours every 2 years of law and ethics, and then that too will be reduced. And what the board for psychologists is suggesting, again, we're having to wait and see, but I think it will pass this year and I think it will be in place, is that we have alternative means of verifying that we've kept up with legal and ethical issues. And so that might be, so we're supposed to designate, if I understand it correctly, yes, I have kept up with legal and ethical issues. The one-time DV training that we all took, most of us took, unless you graduated fairly recently, is no longer in force. So if you did that through the last licensing cycle, you do not have to do it again. Okay? So you're not required to do it twice if you've already done it and submitted it for credit. Similarly, after the 1st of 2005, we were all required to take the one-time 3-hour CE. Again, technically it's up now. But if you got relicensed, say, well, actually it would work that way. You got relicensed sometime in 2005, right? You would have had to have taken that class in order to get your license. So you do not have to take it again now, okay? You're done.